The language of insecurities. Have you ever heard it? A voice that speaks to you in the dead of night, in the silence of an empty room, in the terrifying split-second pause before you are about to take a risk. It is a voice that knows you better than anyone. It knows your deepest fears, your most secret shames, your most fragile hopes. And it is a voice that is utterly, relentlessly, and creatively cruel. It is the voice of the inner critic, the tireless narrator of your own inadequacy, the ghost that haunts the house of your own mind. It whispers to you in 1,000 different ways, but the message is always the same. You are not enough. You have likely spent your entire life trying to silence this voice. You have tried to outrun it with achievement, to drown it out with distraction, to argue with it using the flimsy weapons of positive affirmations. You have constructed a life around the desperate, exhausting project of proving this voice wrong. You have become a perfectionist, a people pleaser, a workaholic. You have curated a perfect external life, a shining fortress of competence and success, hoping that its walls will be thick enough to keep the sound of that terrible inner whisper at bay. But it has not worked. In fact, the more you achieve, the louder the voice seems to get. The more you are praised by the world, the more you feel like a fraud. You are a king who is terrified of his own shadow, a general who is being defeated in a war that is taking place entirely within his own mind. And you are left weary, anxious, and with a profound and devastating sense of powerlessness, convinced that you are afflicted with a unique and incurable form of madness. But what if this is not madness? What if this voice is not your enemy? What if its incessant, painful, and often cryptic whispers are not a sign of your brokenness, but a message from a part of your soul that is desperate to be heard? What if this is not a curse, but a language? A language that you have simply never been taught how to understand. The brutal and uncomfortable truth is that your insecurity is not a monster to be slain. It is a messenger, a guide, a sacred and often agonizing form of communication from the deepest, most wounded and wisest parts of your own being. The problem is not that the voice speaks. The problem is that you have been trying to silence it instead of learning how to translate it. To learn this language is to begin the most important and transformative journey of your life. The journey of coming home to yourself. The origin of the language. The primal wound of not enough. This strange and painful language did not arise from a vacuum. It is a learned dialect, a mother tongue that you were taught in the first and most formative classroom of your life. Your own childhood. The voice of insecurity that speaks to you today is the recorded, internalized voice of an old and unhealed wound. To understand its grammar, you must first understand the trauma that created it. For many, this language was taught in a classroom of overt criticism. You grew up with a parent, a teacher, or a sibling who was a relentless critic. Your achievements were never quite good enough. Your mistakes were magnified and catalogued. You were compared, you were judged, you were measured, and you were found wanting. In this environment, you learned a devastating and life-defining lesson. My worth is not inherent. It is conditional. It must be earned, proven, and constantly defended, and the standard for that proof is perfection. The voice of your inner critic is the ghost of your outer critic, a phantom that you have unconsciously invited into your own mind to continue its terrible work long after the original tormentor has gone. For others, the language was taught not through harsh words, but through a profound and terrible silence. You grew up in an environment of emotional neglect. Your parents may have been physically present, but they were emotionally absent. They were too caught up in their own struggles, their own addictions, their own unhealed wounds, to truly see you. Your triumphs went unnoticed, your sorrows went unsoothed, Your authentic self was met with a blank and indifferent stare. In this desert of connection, you learned a lesson that was, in many ways, even more devastating than that of the criticized child. I am not worthy of attention. My existence is not important. I am, in some fundamental way, invisible. The voice of insecurity in your adult life is the sound of that terrible emptiness, a desperate internal screaming into a void, a frantic attempt to prove that you exist, that you matter. In both of these scenarios, a profound psychological event takes place, an event that the great psychologist Carl Jung would see as the very origin of neurosis. A part of your authentic, whole, and perfectly acceptable self is deemed not enough. The grammar of self-sabotage, translating the dialects of fear. This exiled, insecure self does not speak in clear, declarative sentences. It speaks in the dark, symbolic, and often destructive language of behavior. Your most baffling and self-defeating patterns are not random acts of foolishness. They are the complex grammar of your own insecurity. To become free, you must become a master translator of these dialects of fear. Consider the dialect of procrastination. You have a great and ambitious project, a book to write, a business to start, a life to change, but you find yourself paralyzed, unable to begin, wasting your days on trivial distractions. Your conscious mind, your persona, calls this laziness. You berate yourself for your lack of discipline. But this is a profound mistranslation. Procrastination is not the language of laziness. It is the language of a profound and terrifying fear of failure. The insecure self, the wounded child within, is whispering to you, "If I do not try, I cannot fail. If I do not fail, the terrible verdict that I am truly and fundamentally unworthy cannot be proven. It is safer to live in the perfect theoretical world of my potential than to risk the messy, imperfect, and potentially devastating judgment of the real world." Your procrastination is not an act of sloth. It is a brilliant and tragic act of self-protection. Consider the dialect of perfectionism. You work relentlessly. You polish and refine. You are never satisfied. You miss deadlines. You exhaust yourself. You are unable to ever truly finish anything. The world may praise your high standards, but this is not the language of excellence. It is the language of a desperate and terrified fear of judgment. The insecure self is saying, if I can just create something that is flawless, that is perfect, that is utterly beyond reproach, then no one can criticize it. If I cannot be criticized, then my secret, shameful inadequacy cannot be exposed. I will be safe. Your perfectionism is not a pursuit of the beautiful. It is a flight from the ugly truth of your own perceived worthlessness. It is an attempt to build a fortress so impenetrable that no arrow of judgment can ever reach you, but the cost of this fortress is that you are trapped inside of it, forever polishing the walls of your own magnificent and ultimately empty prison. Consider the dialect of constant comparison. You are perpetually measuring yourself against others. Your life is a relentless and exhausting seesaw of envy and arrogance. When you perceive yourself as better than someone, you feel a fleeting and precarious sense of superiority. When you perceive yourself as lesser, you are plunged into a pit of despair and self-loathing. This is not the language of healthy competition. It is the language of a desperate and frantic search for a stable identity. The insecure self, lacking a solid, internal anchor of its own worth, is forced to constantly look outside of itself for its definition. It is like a ship without a compass, trying to navigate the ocean by constantly looking at the position of other ships. You are not trying to win a race, you are simply trying to find out who and where you are. And consider the dialect of people-pleasing. You are the nice one, the accommodating one, the person who can never say no. You swallow your own needs, you silence your own truth, you contort yourself into a human pretzel to make others comfortable. You call this kindness, but it is not. It is the language of a profound and primal fear of abandonment. The insecure self, the child who learned that its survival depended on being good and useful, is still running the show. It is whispering, if I am endlessly useful, if I am perfectly agreeable, if I cause no trouble, then they will not leave me. My value is my utility. My existence is secured by my own self-erasure. Your niceness is not a gift. It is a bribe, a desperate and ultimately futile attempt to purchase a love that you believe you are not worthy of receiving for free. The illusion of the cure. Why fighting your insecurity makes it stronger. Faced with this internal tormentor, this constant barrage of painful and self-destructive language, your logical response has been to fight back. You have tried to silence the voice with willpower, to drown it out with positive affirmations, to numb it with distraction, or to disprove it with a relentless pursuit of external validation. And you have failed. In fact, you have not just failed, you have made it stronger. To fight the voice of your insecurity is to confirm its premise. When you argue with the critic in your head, "No, I am not worthless. I am successful," you are engaging with it on its own terms. You are implicitly agreeing that your worth is, in fact, a debatable proposition. You have entered the courtroom and you have taken the stand in your own defense, never realizing that the judge, the prosecutor, and the jury are all the same wounded, terrified part of you. It is a show trial that you can never win. To seek external validation as a cure for insecurity is like trying to quench a thirst with salt water. The fleeting pleasure of a compliment, a promotion, 1,000 likes. It is a momentary relief, but it ultimately makes the thirst more intense. You are teaching your psyche that the source of its worth is out there. You are reinforcing the original wound, the belief that your value is not inherent, but is a fragile and fluctuating commodity that is granted and can be taken away by the external world. You are becoming more, not less, dependent on the very thing that is causing your suffering. The great and paradoxical secret of this path is this: the only way to silence the language of insecurity is to stop fighting it and to have the immense courage to learn how to listen to it. The shift is not from fighting to winning, but from resistance to reception. You must stop trying to shoot the messenger and instead have the courage to sit down, open the letter, and read the message it has been so desperately trying to deliver. The illusion of the cure. Why fighting your insecurity makes it stronger. Faced with this internal tormentor, this constant barrage of painful and self-destructive language, your logical response has been to fight back. You have tried to silence the voice with willpower, to drown it out with positive affirmations, to numb it with distraction, or to disprove it with a relentless pursuit of external validation. And you have failed. In fact, you have not just failed, you have made it stronger. To fight the voice of your insecurity is to confirm its premise. When you argue with the critic in your head, "No, I am not worthless. I am successful," you are engaging with it on its own terms. You are implicitly agreeing that your worth is, in fact, a debatable proposition. You have entered the courtroom and you have taken the stand in your own defense, never realizing that the judge, the prosecutor, and the jury are all the same wounded, terrified part of you. It is a show trial that you can never win. To seek external validation as a cure for insecurity is like trying to quench a thirst with salt water. The fleeting pleasure of a compliment, a promotion, 1,000 likes. It is a momentary relief, but it ultimately makes the thirst more intense. You are teaching your psyche that the source of its worth is out there. You are reinforcing the original wound, the belief that your value is not inherent, but is a fragile and fluctuating commodity that is granted and can be taken away by the external world. You are becoming more, not less, dependent on the very thing that is causing your suffering. The great and paradoxical secret of this path is this: the only way to silence the language of insecurity is to stop fighting it, and to have the immense courage to learn how to listen to it. The shift is not from fighting to winning, but from resistance to reception. You must stop trying to shoot the messenger and instead have the courage to sit down, open the letter, and read the message it has been so desperately trying to deliver. The path of the translator. The courage to befriend your own woundedness. This is the path of the alchemist, the path of the soul translator. It is the journey of turning the lead of your neurotic suffering into the gold of your own conscious wholeness. The first step on this path is the practice of radical presence. When the voice of insecurity speaks, when you feel that familiar cold clenching of anxiety in your gut, your lifelong habit has been to run, to fight, to distract. The new practice is to do the opposite. You must pause, you must stop, you must breathe, and you must turn your attention inward. You must feel the full, raw, and often terrifying physical sensation of the insecurity in your body. This is not a passive act, it is an act of supreme courage. You are choosing to be present with your own pain, to hold it in a container of compassionate awareness rather than to act it out unconsciously. You are sitting down with the messenger, offering it a cup of tea, and creating a safe space for it to speak. The second step is the art of compassionate inquiry. Now that you are present with the feeling, you must learn to speak its language. But you do not do this by arguing, you do it by asking gentle, curious, and loving questions. Instead of shouting, "Go away, I am not worthless," you must learn to whisper, "Hello, old friend, what are you so afraid of right now? What is the wound that has been triggered? What is it that you need to feel safe?" You are not speaking to an enemy. You are speaking to the terrified, wounded inner child who is the source of all this noise. You are, for the first time in your life, offering this exiled part of yourself the one thing it has always been starving for: your own non-judgmental, loving attention. As you practice this, you will begin to receive answers. You will see that behind your procrastination is the child who is terrified of being judged. Behind your perfectionism is the child who is desperate to be seen as flawless and therefore safe. Behind your people-pleasing is the child who is terrified of being abandoned. You are no longer just hearing the chaotic noise of the insecurity. You are beginning to understand the deep, coherent, and heartbreaking logic of its pain. The final step is the act of conscious reparenting. Once you have understood the fear and the need of the inner child, you, the conscious, adult part of yourself, must provide it with what it never received from the outside. You must speak to that terrified inner part and say, "I am here, you are safe now, your worth is not on the line, I will not abandon you." This is not a trick. It is the most profound and sacred work a human being can do. It is the act of healing your own primal wound from the inside out. You are becoming the parent to yourself that you never had. The end of the war, the birth of a quiet mind. What is the result of this strange and difficult journey? The voice of insecurity does not disappear overnight, but its quality begins to change. Its desperate, screaming shout begins to soften into a quiet, manageable whisper. It is no longer the terrifying, tyrannical ruler of your inner world. It is a scared and familiar part of you, a part that you have learned to listen to comfort, and to hold. The war is over, and in the silence that follows, something new can finally be born. You are no longer wasting all of your psychic energy on the futile project of self-rejection and internal conflict. That energy is now free. It is free to be used for the purpose of creation of connection, of the courageous and joyful expression of your own authentic self. You do not become a person who is free from insecurity. You become a person who is free in spite of it. You have not slain the monster. You have befriended it, and you have discovered that this monster was never a monster at all. It was a guardian, a fierce and loyal protector of your own most sacred and vulnerable wound. And in learning its language, you have not just silenced a critic, you have come home to yourself. You have become the master translator of your own soul. And that is the only language that will ever truly set you free.